On the eve of the NHL Draft, we discuss a trade the Kings made and a trade they should have made on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are 1 day away from the 2024 NHL entry draft. Looking forward to see what the LA Kings do with the 21st overall pick. We'll have a full breakdown on our Friday show as far as who the Kings take, what that player is all about, and maybe how he fits in to the Kings in the immediate future. But today, we're going to tell you about a trade the Kings made on Thursday, but we're going to start with a trade the Kings should have made last March. TSN hockey insider Pierre LeBrun posted on X, Twitter today, and he said, quote, "Never say never, but all signs point to Matt Roy going to market. Kings and his camp haven't been able to bridge the gap." End quote. Now, this is not a surprise, at least to me, probably not a surprise to you. If you're an everydayer, if you have watched this show on a regular basis, you know I have said that I do not expect Matt Roy to re-sign with the Kings. I don't think the Kings are going to be willing or able to pay Matt Roy what he's going to get from other teams. He is going to cash in, deservedly so, and he is going to leave Los Angeles. Now, that's not a fact. That's an opinion, but it appears that that post from Pierre LeBrun is indicating that the sides are not close. And, Monday is when contracts are going to start being offered, and Matt Roy is going to be in demand. We have talked about GM Rob Blake and the job that he has done, and it's easy to look at the trades that he's made, bringing in Kevin Fiala, Victor Arvidsson, Pierre-Luc Dubois. You can look at the signings, like Philip Deneau, but then there's also the trades he did not make. And Kings defenseman Matt Roy should have been traded at the deadline this past season. Would it have been a very difficult decision to trade him? Homegrown player, 7th round pick, homegrown player who's done everything he's been asked to do and has turned himself into a very good NHL defensive defenseman, a very solid second pairing guy. Yes, that would have been a difficult decision, especially when the organization had preached going into the season this year that the Kings needed to take a next step, that just making the playoffs wasn't good enough. We needed to see progress. Now, that would have been a very difficult message to send to the team and to the fan base as you're making a playoff push that you're going to trade away a very important key piece of the team. I'm sure a significant group of the fan base would have been upset. I think people in the locker room probably wouldn't have thought that was the greatest thing in the world. But GMs get paid to make the difficult decisions. Anyone can make the easy decisions. Trading Matt Roy would have been difficult, but it would have been the right thing to do. And I don't say that just in hindsight. And I will admit, as a fan of the team and holding on to hope and thinking maybe the Kings get in and they have another Cinderella run like we saw in 2012. Hey, the Florida Panthers barely got into the playoffs the previous year. They went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Look where they are now. You hold on to hope, and it's hard to kind of wave the white flag. I don't know that that would have been completely what the Kings would have done had they traded Matt Roy. But in the end, again, difficult decisions have to be made sometimes. And it would have been difficult, but it would have been the right thing to do. And I went on record as saying, after kind of waffling back and forth, that at the end, the Kings needed to trade Matt Roy. They needed to ensure they were not going to lose a player of value and a player that other teams coveted for nothing. But it looks like that is what is going to happen. Now, if the Kings had been projected to win the cup this past year, and if Matt Roy was this linchpin, this key piece of the Kings' Stanley Cup hopes, under those kind of specific circumstances, I could understand holding on to him and then dealing with whatever comes afterwards. The Edmonton Oilers have Leon Draisaitl next year going into the final year of his contract. They just proved this past year that they are a Stanley Cup contender, obviously. What if Draisaitl decides, yeah, I don't want to resign with what you're offering me. I think I can get more on the open market. What do they do with him? And in that situation, I can understand, as hard as it would be to lose a guy like that for nothing, if you think you can really win a cup with that guy, and then if you trade him away, you're not a cup contender, then again, there are some specific circumstances that I can get it. That wasn't the case with the LA Kings. No matter how much we all hoped that the Kings could make a magical run, in our hearts, we knew that was probably not the case. And maybe they win the first round series, and were they really going to go farther after that? It just seemed so unlikely that you have to take a deep breath and in the end do what's best for the organization long term. Now, former Kings defenseman Sean Walker was traded at the deadline for a first round pick. The same Sean Walker, who isn't as good as Matt Roy, who Rob Blake was forced to get rid of because of that bad signing for Cal Peterson when they gave him that 3-year deal, making $5 million a year, to end up being their AHL goalie. They wanted so desperately to get rid of that contract that they were willing to throw in a valuable piece in a trade for the Philadelphia Flyers to make it worth their while. And that piece was Sean Walker. And Sean Walker turned into a first-round pick for the Philadelphia Flyers. There's no doubt the Kings would have gotten a first-round pick in a deal for Matt Roy. Instead, they get nothing, and he's likely gone. Now, he's not officially gone yet, but again, all indications are that he's going to be gone. And you just can't let a guy like that, again, leave your organization for nothing. And it's not like the Kings didn't have anyone ready to take his spot. And you can argue whether Brandt Clarke was ready for that or not, or if you move up Jordan Spence to take his spot and you bring in Brandt Clarke. But there were pieces that were there. Were the Kings going to be a lesser team for not having Matt Roy last season? Yes, they would have been. But was Matt Roy, again, the key piece for the Kings to beat the Edmonton Oilers? Was he the key piece for the Kings to make a deep playoff run? I know it's easy to say now no, but I think at the time, if we all were honest with ourselves, the answer was no, he wasn't. Now, we aren't talking about, trading away a leading goal scorer or your number one goalie going into the playoffs. And I like Matt Roy a lot. He's a good key piece, but he's not that piece. So in the end, as difficult as it would have been, Rob Blake missed this opportunity. And it might be something that gets overlooked when you're talking about looking at the moves Blake has made and giving them pluses and minuses. This one he didn't make, and I think it's going to be a pretty good minus for the LA Kings. So it's not just the signings. It's not just the trades that you make as a general manager. Sometimes it's also the indecision that you have. Sometimes it's the moves that you decide not to make that can also cost you as well. And I think this one, unfortunately, was a missed opportunity for the LA Kings. So that was a trade the Kings didn't make. Up next, we'll tell you about a trade the Kings did make. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I recently purchased tickets to see my beloved alma mater, Fresno State, play a little college football at the Rose Bowl this season against UCLA. And I purchased those tickets using Gametime, and I am a very satisfied customer. The app is very easy to use, very easy to navigate. You just go on there, tap on the listings, sports, music, shows, and they'll list the tickets with the best deals. And it's easy to search for tickets for teams and events. And you get the lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Well, the LA Kings made a trade today. You would have to describe it as a minor deal, but it did involve a player that has been a part of the Kings lineup for the last couple of seasons. And there was something about this trade that was very rare. The LA Kings sent forward Carl Grundstrom to the San Jose Sharks for veteran defenseman Kyle Burroughs. As for what the Kings get for Grundstrom, Kyle Burroughs is 28 years old, 6 foot, 193-pound right-handed defenseman, originally a 7th-round pick of the New York Islanders in 2013. He's played a total of 168 NHL games with the Avalanche, Canucks, and Sharks. Last season in San Jose, he appeared in 73 games, by far the most games in a season in his career. He had 2 goals and 6 assists for 8 points, led the team in hits with 233, which also ranked 16th in the NHL. For example, for reference, the Kings' leading hit total was 189 by Andreas Englund. For Burroughs in his career, he's posted 5 goals with 14 assists, 19 points. He is signed for the next 2 seasons at $1.1 million per season. When I reached out to Locked On Sharks host JD Young, asked him his honest assessment of Kyle Burroughs, he said the following, quote, "He's a solid 6th defenseman, not afraid to stand up for teammates. He's a right shot, but played both the right and left sides. Super physical dude. Will probably look better in the Kings system," end quote. So an Andreas Englund type, maybe not as big, but maybe a bit more physical. Seems certainly like a depth move. If you think the Kings need to be a team that has a bit more bite to it, Kyle Burroughs seems like he could provide that. So the Kings shore up, their defense, and seems like, he's a guy that he could be in the running for the Kings' 6th defenseman. You've got Andreas Englund, you've got Kyle Burroughs now, and Jacob Morar would be in the mix as well. As for what the Kings gave up, Carl Grundstrom was a 2nd-round pick of the Maple Leafs back in 2016. He came to LA in the Jake Muzzin trade. He's played in 236 career NHL games, all in Los Angeles. He had 40 goals and 27 assists for 67 points in his career. 50 games last season for the Kings. Grundstrom had 8 goals and 4 assists for 12 points. I said after the season, look at the Kings' possible roster for next year, and it wouldn't have surprised me if Grundstrom was not brought back by the LA Kings. Kings will now likely fill his position as a 4th liner with somebody a little younger and a little cheaper. Grundstrom, who is still a restricted free agent that needs to be signed by the Sharks. He's 26 years old, and he made $1.3 million per season over the last 2 years. Now you've got a 24-year-old Akil Thomas or a 23-year-old Alex Turcotte that can take his spot. They each make $775,000 per year to be his replacement. Kings GM Rob Blake openly talked about the Kings making room for some of the AHL guys like Turcotte, like Thomas, maybe Samuel Fagemo. And that meant that Grundstrom and possibly Blake Lizotte and Trevor Lewis, also restricted free agents, could be on their way out. New Kings head coach Jim Miller did talk in his introductory press conference about the Kings having more of a presence around the net, going hard to the paint. And I'm not saying Akil Thomas and Alex Turcotte can't do that. They can. But Carl Grundstrom was one of the Kings players that was a bit better at going into those dirty areas. Grundstrom was a good, honest player for the Kings. Seemed like he was well liked by everyone. And even though he's going to a division rival, I wish him good luck as long as he's not playing the Kings. And he should get a chance for a bigger role on a bad team that is rebuilding. My first thought on hearing about this trade was, wow, the Kings and Sharks made a trade. I can't remember the last time that happened. So after a minutes-long investigation, I did find that on March the 5th of 2014, the Kings did make a trade with the Sharks for somebody named James Livingston. Now, it was a swap of a player for a 7th-round conditional pick. Now, the conditional pick was that James Livingston would re-sign with the Kings. Well, he didn't, and so the Kings kept the pick. So that player for pick trade between the Kings and Sharks was never actually finalized. So it was a trade that ended up not ever being consummated. In 2008, the Kings and Sharks swapped draft picks. The Kings gave up a 4th rounder that year in 2008 in exchange for a 4th rounder in 2009 and a 5th rounder in 2010. So it looks like this is the first ever player for player swap ever between the LA Kings and the San Jose Sharks, which is pretty amazing. Now, the Kings and Ducks don't do a lot of business either, but even I can remember the Sean O'Donnell trade back in the day. Now, if you care about such things, I would give this trade for the Kings a C plus. It is shoring up some depth in an area that the Kings could use a little extra. And it looks like they got a little tougher. And they give up a player who, yes, he has some value, but is a guy who is going to be able to be replaced, I think, by younger and cheaper options. So in the end, Carl Grundstrom, good solid player for the Kings, solid bottom six guy, gave you everything he had. But he's not irreplaceable. And the Kings, again, get a little bit tougher and have a little bit more depth now on the back end on the blue line. So we'll see. As our guy JD Young said, maybe he is improved, going forward, playing on a better team with better structure. Kyle Burrows, I think he was a second pairing guy in San Jose. He's definitely a third pairing guy, you would think, here in Los Angeles. But a rare trade between the LA Kings and the San Jose Sharks. Well, the countdown to the NHL Draft is officially on. We'll talk a little bit about that and a few other notes as well involving the Kings next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, even when the NHL and the NBA season come to an end. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Major League Baseball, golf, soccer, NASCAR, and it's also never too early to place down a bet on how your favorite NFL team is going to do for the upcoming season. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sports betting is not yet legal in California. However, you can still sign up at FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds on your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action from anywhere with their free games featuring real cash prizes. No matter where you are on the Golden State, there will be plenty of options to back the underdog or the favorite once sports betting becomes available. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Well, the NHL Draft is tomorrow in Las Vegas. And again, the Kings have the 21st overall pick. Our guest on Wednesday's show, Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty, made a case for the Kings looking to shore up what is likely the biggest position of need for them at the moment, and that would be a left shot defenseman. Now, maybe a right side winger certainly could be on the priority list as well, or a winger of any kind. Certainly, though, on the right side, as we talked about on the power play with Victor Arvidsson likely being gone, that's something that you could point at as a position of need as well. But I think all things being equal, I could see them going in that direction. But I still think in the end, you should always go with the best player available. Those areas that are places of need now may not be areas of need in 5 years or so when a player is typically ready to make an NHL impact. Obviously, that's different if you have a top 5 pick, something like that. But that's not the case for the Kings. Again, picking 21st, I just think you take the best available player at that position. And if there's a chance to make a big swing on a player who's got a lot of big time potential, but for whatever reason has fallen in the draft, maybe he's had some injuries, issues, maybe some off the ice things, something like that. I think there's an opportunity for that as well. Longtime director of amateur scouting, Mark Yannetti for the Kings, has had 3 picks in the 20s in his time on the job, and he's done a decent job with those picks. Selected forward Adrian Kempe with the 29th pick in 2014. Obviously, that has been a home run pick. He also selected forward Rasmus Kupari. He was 20th in 2018, and defenseman Tobias Bjornfoot taken 22nd in 2019. And both of them have made it to the NHL, but both have yet to show that they can be legitimate contributors at the NHL level. Don't know if you saw it or not, but Tobias Bjornfoot, I had forgotten that he had eventually made his way to the Florida Panthers. He actually skated on the ice with the Stanley Cup after the Panthers won Game 7 against the Oilers, as some of the players who are, they didn't play, but they were on the roster when it's a kind of a newer thing in the NHL. The teams allow those guys to get dressed out in their uniforms, even though they didn't play at all in the playoffs. and they can come out and have a moment with the cup, which is always kind of weird to me. I get doing it. You may never get that chance again. And if you get the chance, hard to say no, but it's always a little weird that you're skating around with the cup when you had really no impact on the team winning the cup. Anyway, Tobias Bjornfoot was a Kings pick in the 20s, and he's on it. He's around the NHL, but again, hasn't proven to be a big time NHL player for sure. Kupari, of course, now in Winnipeg, and I mentioned Bjornfoot is in Florida. So looking forward to the Kings having a first round selection for the first time in the last 2 years. The last time the Kings had a first round pick, they took Brandt Clark in 2021. The NHL awards took place tonight in Las Vegas. There were no LA Kings that were up for any awards, but former LA Kings first round pick defenseman Brock Faber did finish second in the Calder Trophy final vote for Rookie of the Year. Connor Bedard of the Chicago Blackhawks, not surprisingly, was the Rookie of the Year, but nice for Brock Faber to finish in second. And I would say, I know there are some that probably see that and wish the Kings had held on to him. I still have zero regrets about the Kings trading away Brock Faber. He certainly looks like he's going to turn into a solid NHL defenseman, and he should have a fine career. But the Kings got Kevin Fiala in return in the trade. He is an elite talent. The Kings need guys that can put the puck in the net. So I'm fine with the trade. You got to give to get. The Kings gave up a good young defenseman. They got a elite forward. So win-win for both teams. Plus the Kings have depth at that position. Brock Faber, a right-handed shot defenseman, and you've got Brandt Clark, you've got Jordan Spence. So again, giving up something of value for something of value, and you do it at a position where you have some depth. I have no regrets over the Kings making that trade. One other note I did see, obviously there are signings going on around the NHL. I keep hitting refresh on my phone all the time to see what the latest moves are and if the Kings have done anything. I know there was a certain player that I had thought would be a great fit for the Kings. I think some other Kings fans did as well. And that was Vancouver Canucks forward Dakota Joshua. Certainly not a household name, but a big, rugged power forward who's got a little bit of skill, but brings a physical element. Great forechecker, a big body. He was going to be an unrestricted free agent for the Canucks on July 1st. Unfortunately, the Canucks did re-sign him. He gets a 4-year deal worth $3.25 million annually, so he will stay in Vancouver. But that would have been nice if the Kings could have made a run at him, but unfortunately, that is not a possibility. And I did see that former Kings head coach Todd McClellan has been linked to the vacant Columbus Blue Jackets job. I think he'd be a good fit for them. Blue Jackets looking to hire a coach that can help develop some of their younger players. And of course, the Kings are still on the hook for his salary for next season. Now, it doesn't have any salary cap implications because he's a coach, not a player. But if he does take that Blue Jackets job, the Kings would be off the hook for the $5 million salary for him for next season. I think he would be a good hire, but it is a little bit odd if you believe the reports from earlier a few months back when the Sharks were still looking for a head coach. There was talk about maybe a Todd McClellan reunion in San Jose. But again, if the reports are true, apparently he said he wasn't looking to get back in the NHL with a team that was rebuilding. Well, if he takes over the Columbus Blue Jackets, he'll be getting back in the NHL, taking over a team that is rebuilding. So that would be an interesting hire for the Columbus Blue Jackets. We'll see if Todd McClellan is back coaching in the NHL next season. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on tomorrow's show, it is a Kings Fan Friday feedback show. But we will get to your emails and your comments on the past week in the NHL after we start with a recap of the Kings' first-round selection in the NHL Draft. So again, the first part of tomorrow's show will be dedicated to who the Kings select, and we'll tell you all about that player and what different scouts have said about that player. But we will have your emails as well later on. Anything involving that first round pick, if you want to wait until after the pick is made and then bust off an email, that would be awesome. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You can talk about that or anything else on your mind involving the LA Kings. Maybe you want to talk about the trade that was made today, or the fact the Kings didn't trade Matt Roy when they had a chance to. I want to stay interactive with the show on social media. We're on X, we're on Twitter, Instagram, at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings, go.